The day I walked out of prison, the whole world turned its back on me. Every face I had once known looked away. Every door I had once entered was shut. The sky overhead was the color of pewter, and the rain fell in thin, cold needles that cut right through my jacket. I stood at the gate with nothing but a worn duffel bag and a chest full of silence, watching the free world carry on without me as if the past 5 years had been nothing more than a dream I had dreamed alone. Only one person stood in that rain without an umbrella. She was young and poised, dressed in a coat far too expensive for weather like this, her dark hair already beginning to cling to her cheeks from the moisture. She looked at me steadily, the way a person looks at something they have studied for a very long time. Then she tilted her head slightly and asked, with all the calm in the world, "Do you want to marry me?" I thought she was mocking me. I genuinely believed she had come to humiliate me at my lowest, to press her heel into the last shred of dignity I had left. I almost laughed. Almost. Her name was Serena Calloway. I did not understand her then. I did not understand her for many years that followed, and the cruelest part of everything that has happened to me is that I finally understood her only after she was gone. Her voice came to me through a recorder, small and silver, that her lawyer pressed into my hands a week after the funeral. The funeral I arranged myself, because there was no one else. 5 years of marriage, and at the end of it, I was the only one left standing beside her grave in the rain. I sat in the empty apartment that still smelled faintly of her perfume and pressed play with trembling fingers. "Could you please like me?" her voice said, soft and achingly sweet, even just a little bit. I heard every word she had recorded. I sat there until the room went dark around me and the city outside grew quiet. Then I wept in a way I had not wept since I was a child, not because she was gone, though that grief was enormous and raw, but because I had been standing beside a lighthouse for 5 years and had somehow convinced myself I was alone in the dark. The flowers she had brought home just days before the accident were still on the table. White lilies, my favorite. She had picked each one herself, she had told me proudly, holding them out with that rare, unguarded smile of hers. "Does it smell good, Elliot?" I went out of my way to choose every single one. "Yes," I had told her. "It smells wonderful." She had laughed, and the warmth in her eyes had been like starlight, gentle and vast. How could I have ever said no to her? And yet, how little I had truly said yes. The lilies were dying now. Their petals curled at the edges and fell one by one onto the table, and with each one that dropped, something in me fell apart all over again. She had promised to replace the flowers in the house. She had always been making small quiet promises like that, filling the spaces around me with care so light-handed I had barely noticed its weight until it was lifted. I called her lawyer, a reserved man named Grant, the following morning. "Mr. Grant," I said, "please donate everything. Every asset, every share, every property she left in my name. I want it directed to the children's orphanage on the east side. All of it." Grant was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, carefully, "Mr. Hargrove, did you love her?" I did not answer him. I simply smiled into the phone, said goodbye, and set it down. But I knew the truth. I had always known it, even when I was too stubborn and too broken to say it out loud. I loved her. I had loved her for longer than I had ever admitted to myself. And I had spent 5 years accepting her love like a man who stands in the sun but refuses to lift his face to it, always turned slightly away, always holding something back. I went on living after that, though living is perhaps too strong a word for what I did. I moved through the days like smoke, my health declining in the way it always had since prison had stripped my body of its resilience. A simple cold could floor me for 2 weeks. My joints ached. My sleep was shallow and fitful, broken by sounds that no longer existed. In my last days, lying in a hospital bed and staring up at the white ceiling, I finally let the truth rise all the way to the surface. I loved her. I had always loved her so much. I had simply been too late. Then my eyes closed. Part 2, a second chance at a life already lived. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a bed I recognized instantly. The ceiling was different. The light was warmer. And a woman was gripping my hand so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Elliot," Margaret Hargrove said, her voice cracking on the word. "Elliot, please. I need you to listen to me." I blinked slowly. The room came into focus. The wallpaper, the curtains, the portrait of the family on the wall with its 4 faces arranged in careful order. My adoptive father, Victor, stood near the window with his arms crossed, his jaw tight. In the corner, hunched on a chair and already weeping theatrically into his sleeves, was Marcus. And beside me, silent and unreadable, stood my older sister, Vivian. I understood immediately. My mind was sharp with the memories of a whole other lifetime, layered over this moment like a transparency, and I could see through it perfectly to everything that was about to happen. Margaret's grip tightened. "Elliot, there was an incident," she began. "Marcus and an actor from the film set, a man named Daniel, they had an argument backstage. Daniel fell down the stairs. He's in a coma. The doctors aren't sure when, or whether, he'll wake up." She paused. Her eyes were wet, but the set of her mouth was resolute. There were no surveillance cameras at the scene. Only you and Marcus were present as witnesses. If you were to tell the police that it was an accident, that you were the one who lost your footing during the scuffle, they would have no reason to look further. She squeezed my hand once more. "Elliot. You know how much Marcus means to this family. He is just starting out. One mistake like this would ruin everything he has built. You are strong. You could survive this. And afterward, I swear to you, this family will take care of you for the rest of your life." The words landed exactly as I remembered them. She had said the exact same thing the first time, in the life that had already passed. She had held my hand and wept and made her promises with such sincere feeling that I had believed her. I had nodded. I had walked into a police station and given them the confession she needed, and I had spent 5 years in a cell paying for a crime I did not commit, while the family's visits grew shorter and then stopped entirely. I had believed her. And she had forgotten me before my 2nd year was out. I looked at my adoptive mother now, this woman who had raised me and fed me and told me she loved me, and I saw clearly what I had not been able to see before. Love, for her, was conditional. It flowed in the direction of her blood, and I was not her blood. I was the boy the hospital had given her by mistake, the wrong child raised in the right house, useful when needed and discardable when not. I gently removed her hand from mine. "No," I said. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Margaret froze. Victor's expression darkened. Marcus, who had been weeping into his sleeve, lifted his head and stared at me with something that flickered briefly between shock and fear. "No," I repeated, clearly and without anger. "I will not take the fall for him. I am grateful for 25 years of care. Truly. But I will not trade my entire life for that gratitude." "You selfish, ungrateful," Victor started forward, his face flushing. "Victor." Vivian's voice cut through the room like a blade, and he stopped. No one spoke for a long moment. Margaret began crying in earnest then, ugly and desperate, her careful composure crumbling. Marcus threw himself onto the floor dramatically, wailing that his career would be destroyed, that he was too young, that he hadn't meant it, that he couldn't go to prison, that his whole life would be ruined. Victor hovered over him, murmuring that it would be all right, that everything would be fine, while casting me looks of pure venom. I sat up in bed and looked at Vivian. She did not speak. She only looked back at me with eyes that held something quiet and complicated. She had given me the same look the first time around, when she had pulled me aside and told me gently that the Hargrove house was no longer a safe place for me, that I should leave. I had not listened then. I was listening now. There was a sound at the door. 2 police officers in plain clothes stood waiting in the corridor, and I could see from Margaret's sudden stillness that she had not expected them quite so soon. I answered every question they put to me with the simple, unadorned truth. I had been present. I had witnessed the altercation. I had seen Marcus and Daniel argue on the staircase landing backstage. I could not speak to what had happened in the precise final second, but I would not claim responsibility for something I had not done. The interrogation was short. The officers were professional. When they left, they took Marcus with them for further questioning. Margaret's scream followed me down the hallway. Victor's face was a storm of fury and grief. But I walked steadily, the way a man walks when he has already lost everything once and therefore no longer fears the loss. Vivian caught up with me near the entrance. "Elliot." She said my name the way she always had, not as a label but as something personal, worn smooth from use. "The Hargrove house has no place for you anymore. You should leave. I know. She hesitated. Do you blame me? For any of it? I looked at her for a long moment. In the life before this one, she had been the only member of the family who continued to visit me in prison, the only one who showed up with quiet shame and stubborn love, until eventually even she was gently discouraged from coming. She had not created this situation. She had never wanted it. No, I said. I don't blame you. Take care of yourself, Vivian. Live the life that belongs to you. She said nothing. But her eyes were bright, and she reached out and briefly pressed her hand against my arm before stepping back. I packed what little was mine, walked out through the iron gates of the Hargrove estate, and turned my face toward the avenue of sycamore trees that lined the road beyond. The wind moved through them, sending a wave of amber and gold leaves spiraling down around my feet. The air tasted clean. The sunlight, thin and pale for the season, landed on my shoulders with unexpected warmth. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I could breathe. I did not know where I was going. I knew only that I was free, and that somewhere in this city, a woman I had spent a lifetime failing was still alive. Part 3, What she hid beneath the surface. I was so focused on putting one foot in front of the other that I nearly walked into her. She appeared on the path ahead of me without warning, and for a moment I simply stopped and stared, the way a man stares at something he was certain he would never see again. She was younger than I remembered. There was still a softness in her face that the years had gradually sharpened away in the life before, and she wore her coat with that particular ease that had always made even casual clothing look deliberate on her. Serena Calloway looked at me with calm, unreadable eyes and said, "Where are you planning to go?" I tried to answer her. But the words would not come, because without any warning at all, my eyes filled with tears. It was absurd. I was a grown man, standing in the middle of a public road with a duffel bag at my feet, crying. I had not wept when my adoptive family abandoned me. I had not wept when I was alone and freezing in a prison cell. But seeing her standing there, living and breathing and exactly as I remembered her, cracked something open inside me that I had not realized was sealed. "What happened?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. "I've just left home," I managed. "I'm running away, essentially." I paused, then added, a little desperately, "Do you think you could take me in for a few days?" She studied me for a long moment with those eyes that had always missed nothing. "Sure," she said. "If you dare to come, I dare to take you in." Her apartment was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, quiet, immaculately arranged, with high windows that let in long rectangles of pale afternoon light. She had always surrounded herself with space rather than clutter, as if keeping the air around her clean was a form of self-preservation. Walking through the rooms felt like moving through a memory, every corner familiar in ways it should not have been yet. I stepped into the bathroom and faced myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy and red. I looked like something the weather had dragged in, and for a moment I felt a sharp, self-directed embarrassment. I had made a private promise to myself, in all those imagined reunions with her, that I would come to her with my head held high. That I would be someone worth standing beside. And instead, here I was on the very first day, a wreck on her doorstep. I dried my face and went back out. She was leaning against the kitchen doorframe, waiting. When I recounted what had happened at the Hargrove house, everything from Marcus and Daniel's altercation to my refusal and the arrival of the police, she listened without interrupting. When I finished, a faint line appeared between her brows. "This isn't over," she said. "Even with Marcus taken in for questioning, you're not fully cleared. There's no hard evidence either way yet. And the Hargrove family won't sit quietly while their golden son is at risk." "I know," I said. Then, before she could continue, "Serena, I'm hungry. Could you make something to eat?" She stared at me. I met her gaze with complete sincerity. She exhaled slowly. "Fine. Wait here." I sat at the kitchen table and watched her move around the space with the particular confidence of someone who is absolutely certain she knows what she is doing. She did not. In this early version of herself, before the years had quietly taught her how to care for the person she loved, Serena Calloway had almost never cooked for herself. There had always been household staff, restaurant reservations, catered meetings. She stood at the counter with a serious expression and the focus of someone defusing something delicate, and when she set a bowl of noodles in front of me 12 minutes later, they were coiled together in a compact, slightly gray mass. I picked up my chopsticks and took a bite. She watched me from across the table, her expression carefully composed but her eyes betraying something hopeful and uncertain, something I recognized as the same look she had worn when she handed me flowers in a life she no longer remembered. "It's delicious," I said honestly. "A little salty, but I genuinely like it." She picked up her own chopsticks, tasted a bite, and in the next half-second dropped both chopsticks and carried the bowl directly to the bin. "That was terrible," she announced. "I don't understand how it ended up that bad." I followed the steps. I laughed. It came out easily, surprised out of me, and for a brief and luminous moment the weight of 2 lifetimes lifted off my chest. "It'll get better," I said. "How can you be so sure?" "Because you'll be cooking for me from now on. And I'm the only diner who matters." She looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. Then the corner of her mouth curved, just slightly, into something that was not quite a smile but lived in the same neighborhood. "You're a strange person," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "But I really like you, Serena." The room went quiet. I had not planned to say it. It had simply come out, pulled free by gravity after being held in for so long. She did not startle, did not frown, did not question me with the cool precision she usually brought to unexpected information. Instead, something in her face softened, almost imperceptibly, and her eyes curved at the corners. "I like you too, Elliot," she said. And that was where it began. Part 4, The Hargrove Family's Final Move. I stayed at Serena's apartment for 2 weeks. They were the quietest, strangest, most inexplicably warm 2 weeks of either of my lives. She left early for work and came home in the evenings, sometimes with documents tucked under one arm and a look of focused concentration still on her face, already thinking through whatever problem she had not yet solved. I would hear her in the kitchen, the particular determined sounds of someone attempting competence, and I would lean in the doorway and watch her under the warm yellow light, her hair twisted up and slightly escaping, her beautiful face intent and unguarded in a way she rarely was in public. She improved remarkably quickly, once she decided she was going to. By the end of the first week, the noodles were untangled and properly seasoned. By the end of the second, she had mastered 2 more dishes and was researching a third with the seriousness of a person reading case files. I had never had this with her before. In the first life, we had met only at our lowest, married in the aftermath of separate disasters, and built our life together in the space that grief had already cleared. There had been warmth between us, and comfort, and something I had refused to name. But I had never seen this version of her, younger and softer and still becoming, and watching her now felt like being given back something I had not known was lost. Meanwhile, the Hargrove family had not been idle. The news broke across every platform simultaneously, a coordinated and deliberate flood. The Hargrove family had given a press interview in which Margaret, her voice trembling with rehearsed sorrow, explained that Elliot had never been their biological son. A hospital mix-up at birth had placed him in their home while their true child, Marcus, had grown up elsewhere. When the DNA testing had revealed the truth years ago, they had lovingly and generously adopted Elliot officially, raising him as their own even after knowing the truth. And now, at this critical moment, rather than stepping forward to take responsibility for a terrible accident, Elliot was allowing their biological son, their real child, to bear the consequences alone. "We know we raised you," Margaret said into the camera, her eyes glistening. "We know we gave you everything. But Marcus is our blood. He is young, and he made a terrible mistake, and we hope that you, Elliot, would find it in your heart to do the right thing." In the corner of the broadcast, Marcus appeared briefly, his face pale and streaked with genuine fear, his voice quiet. "Brother, I know I don't deserve to ask. But if you could help me, I would spend the rest of my life making it right. Just let me keep taking care of our parents." The internet ignited. Comments flooded every platform. The narrative was perfectly constructed, a biological child at risk, an adoptive one refusing to sacrifice himself for the family that had given him everything. People who had never met me, knew nothing about me, and had no access to any real information felt entirely confident condemning me. My name, my face, my old social accounts were uncovered and passed around as evidence of my moral failure. I read it all without particular emotion. Serena came home that evening with a sharpness in her step that I recognized. "Elliot," she said, setting her bag down. "I can help you." In the life before this one, I had said no. I had said no out of some complicated private logic that had seemed reasonable at the time and catastrophic in hindsight. I had not wanted her dragged into my mess. I had not wanted to owe her more than I already felt I did. I had not wanted to need anyone, because needing people had always ended badly. And the last time I had seen her alive, she had looked at me with eyes full of a love I had refused to acknowledge, and walked away, and never come back. I did not say no this time. I crossed the room and put my arms around her, holding on in a way I had never permitted myself before, and said, quietly, into her hair, "Yes. Please help me." She went still for a moment. Then her arms came up and held me back. "All right," she said, and her voice was steadier than usual. "Then let's begin." Serena moved with a precision that had always made her remarkable. She deployed the resources of the Calloway family quietly and methodically, approaching the investigation not as a legal matter but as a research problem. She had people examining the backstage layout of the film set, combing through every available fragment of surveillance from surrounding streets, neighboring businesses, and other production crews who had been shooting in the area that day. The Hargrove family had been thorough. All the obvious sources had been scrubbed clean. But thoroughness has limits, and Serena did not stop at the obvious. After 3 weeks of careful work, they found it, a piece of footage from a camera mounted on a nearby film cruise equipment vehicle, shot at an oblique angle, slightly overexposed, and partially obscured by a structural beam. The quality was poor. But through the noise and blur, the distinctive jacket Marcus had worn that day was unmistakable. His bleached hair caught the light in a way that made him identifiable even in shadow. And the footage showed, clearly enough, a heated confrontation on the staircase landing, followed by a shove, followed by Daniel falling. It was not perfect evidence. But it was real, and it was enough. Marcus found out. I still do not know exactly how. Perhaps someone on his side had access to information they should not have had, or perhaps he simply knew Serena well enough to anticipate what she was capable of. Either way, he acted the way a cornered man acts, without reason and without restraint. Serena disappeared on a Tuesday afternoon. I received the call an hour later. Marcus's voice on the other end was high and strange, stripped of the polished charm he usually carried like armor. "The evidence," he said. "Bring me everything, every copy, every original. Come alone, to the warehouse on Meridian Road. If you want her back, come now." The address he gave me was for an abandoned storage facility on the edge of the industrial district. I knew it. I had been there before, in a life Marcus no longer remembered, standing in the same position with the same impossible choice. I went. The warehouse was vast and poorly lit, smelling of rust and old concrete. Marcus stood in the center of the floor surrounded by a group of men I recognized with a cold jolt of clarity, the same men who, in a different version of this life, had been paid to make my years in prison into something close to a sustained nightmare. Seeing them now, I understood what I had not understood then. None of it had been coincidence. It had all been arranged. Marcus had wanted me not just imprisoned but destroyed, quietly and completely, where no one would think to look. I handed over the flash drive. Then, the moment Serena was released and standing beside me, I lunged forward and tried to take it back. The warehouse turned into chaos. The men moved fast and hit hard. An iron bar swung for Serena's head and I stepped into its path, taking the blow across my shoulder and back. The pain was immediate and enormous, a white-hot stripe of fire that ran from my shoulder blade down to my hip. But I kept moving. I kept my hand on Serena's arm and fought and retreated and fought again until we broke out through a side door into the cold air of the alley beyond. We made it to the street. I leaned against a wall and breathed. "If it hurts," Serena said, her voice tightly controlled, "say so. Don't pretend." "It hurts," I said. She exhaled. Her hand found mine and held it. "Don't ever do something that reckless again," she said. "Promise me." "Only if you promise to stop getting kidnapped," I replied. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh and looked away, but her grip on my hand did not loosen. What Marcus did not know was that Serena had anticipated him. Every piece of evidence she had gathered existed in multiple secured locations. The flash drive he had snatched away contained only copies, and even those copies were sufficient. She had planned for the possibility that something might go wrong, because Serena Calloway had always planned for the possibility that something might go wrong. I had come to understand, how she loved, quietly, thoroughly, with her eyes open and her contingencies already in place. 3 days later, Daniel woke from his coma. His first coherent statement to the police was a clear and detailed account of what had happened on that staircase. He named Marcus without hesitation. He described the argument, the shove, and the fall. And Serena, already prepared, submitted the supporting evidence through her legal team the same afternoon. The case collapsed around Marcus in the space of a morning. He drove away from the city at high speed, fleeing through streets he had always treated as his personal property, and on a rain-slick bend somewhere on the outskirts he lost control. The accident was severe and immediate. He did not survive it. The men who had helped him were arrested on multiple charges, among them the kidnapping of Serena and the assault that had left me with a cracked rib and a bruised shoulder. Margaret received the news in stages, each one taking something else from her. By the end of it she was quiet in a way that was not peaceful, sitting in the Hargrove house with the curtains closed, her face a mask of hollowed grief. Victor, whatever his faults, had always genuinely loved Marcus, and that love shattered him in ways that even anger could not hold together. After a long and painful private reckoning, he made the decision to take Margaret abroad for her recovery, somewhere far from every room that still held the shape of the son he had lost. Before he left, he came to see me. He stood at my door, a man who had looked at me like an enemy not 2 months ago, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. Then he pressed his lips together and said, "I was not fair to you. I know that is not enough. But I am sorry, Elliot." I looked at him for a moment. "I hope she recovers," I said. "I genuinely do. Take care of her." He nodded once, tightly, and left. Vivian took charge of what remained of the family business. She had always been sharp, always been capable, always been held slightly back by the shadow that Marcus cast simply by being the preferred child. That shadow was gone now. She moved into it with the quiet confidence of someone who had been waiting a long time for the space. I watched her from a distance and felt something uncomplicated and warm. She was going to be magnificent. She always had been. Part 5, Everything she had been carrying. It was a warm afternoon in early spring when I finally said it properly. We were in Serena's apartment, the one that had become as familiar to me as my own breath, flooded with the particular soft gold light that came through the west-facing windows in the late afternoon. She was at the kitchen counter, trimming fresh lilies she had brought home that morning, her profile clean and bright against the light, her movements careful and precise the way everything she did was careful and precise. I crossed the room and put my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder, and said quietly, "Serena, I want to tell you something. I really, really like you." She went still. Then she turned her head, and her eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that had been there for as long as I had known her, patient and deep and very bright. "I like you too, Elliot," she said, and her voice was completely steady, and completely sincere, and filled with a warmth that I finally allowed myself to receive. It was not the same as the voice on the recorder. It was better. Because she was here. Because I was here. Because this time, neither of us was carrying it alone. Part 6, What she knew all along. What I did not know, could not have known, was that I had not been reincarnated alone. Serena had been there first. She had come back into consciousness in the same disorienting way I had, with the full weight of a life already lived pressing down on a much younger version of herself, and she had not wasted a single day of it. She had used her position and her resources to look into the case that had sent me to prison the first time, working backward through the Hargrove family's carefully constructed story with the relentless patience of someone who had 5 years of regret driving her. She had known, even then, even before we spoke, even before she stood outside that prison gate in the rain and asked me a question I had answered with silence, that Marcus had not acted alone. She had tried to find proof. The Hargrove family had been thorough, and the tracks were expertly covered, and she had not been able to get what she needed in time. So she had done the only thing she could, she had found me, and she had stood beside me in the rain, and she had asked me to build a life with her. She had loved me for longer than I knew. That part was not the reincarnation. That part was simply true. She had seen me at an academic ceremony years earlier, long before any of the disasters, when I was the student council president of our university and I had stood at a podium and spoken with a confidence that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with the pleasure of being genuinely good at something. She had been sitting in the audience that day, her mentor seated beside her, and afterward he had grumbled at her with great affection that she reminded him of me, and he was not sure that was a compliment. She had started paying attention after that. From a careful distance, the way private people pay attention to things they are not yet ready to approach directly. And then I had gone to prison for something she did not believe I had done, and something in her had hardened into a determination that had not softened for the rest of her first life. When the voice recorder she had left behind finally explained all of this, I wept. But they were different tears than the ones I had shed before. These were the tears of a man who understood, at last, the full dimensions of what he had been given. There is a particular cruelty in love that arrives too late for the one who waited. Serena had carried hers for 2 lifetimes, patient and hidden, feeding it quietly in the private hours when no one was watching, afraid that naming it would chase it away, afraid that I would look at her and see only convenience and calculation where she felt everything. "Could you please like me even just a little bit?" she had asked, in the voice that had broken me. And now, in this life, in this apartment full of afternoon light and the scent of lilies, I could finally answer her. I did not just like her. I had loved her from the moment I understood what love was, which had been, embarrassingly and with painful irony, the moment I lost her the first time. But she was not lost now. She was here. She was standing 3 feet away from me, arranging flowers in a vase with focused attention, occasionally glancing at me from the corner of her eye to check whether I was still watching. I was always watching. There is a saying that people who are meant for each other will always find their way back. I believe it now in the way I believe in very few things, completely and without condition. Because I have lived a life where we did not find our way back, and I know what that looks like. It looks like a voice on a recorder, and dying lilies on a table, and a love so large and so carefully hidden that it could only be measured by its absence. This is what it looks like when we find it in time, ordinary evenings. Warm light. The smell of cooking. 2 people in the same room, sometimes talking and sometimes not, occasionally catching each other's eyes across the space between them and smiling for no reason except that the other person is there. Even through distance and time, through grief and regret, through everything that was broken and everything that was buried, we found each other again. And this time, I intend to spend every day making sure she knows it.